So depending on what part of the internet you tend to hang out on, you might have seen a very viral moment recently from well-known red pill weirdo Sneako having a photo op with some of his oldest fans. And by oldest fans, I mean 11, 12 at most. And it's a heartbreakingly awful moment that will make you lose some faith in humanity. So trigger warnings for all the usual things before I play this clip.
What did you take? Fuck the woman, fuck the woman.
What? No, wait. We love women. We love women. We love women.
But not like transgenders.
Yes, sir. We love everybody. No.
Okay,
yeah,
yeah, merch, preach.
What have I done?
In this moment, these little boys reflect back to Sneako the exact same rhetoric and energy that he has been spewing out for the better part of a year, complete with misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia. All that was missing was the newfound anti-Semitism, COVID denial, and a little bit of Bitcoin nonsense. And you'd have the entire Sneako catalog right there on display. I've talked about Sneako a few times. I gave him an empathetic analysis in my conservative sex video, but for the most part, I've been trying to stay away from making too much content about this guy because there's probably no one who is more blatantly grifting on the right wing than Sneako. He genuinely has no real solid opinions on anything other than being anti whatever the left or woke is in a given moment. He genuinely makes me sad. Like, at least Andrew Tate has the traumatic childhood backstory to explain his sociopathic behavior. But Sneako, he just had a bad breakup and started spewing red pill shit as a result. And then he realized he can make way more money as a foaming at the mouth red pill goofball than a moderately talented filmmaker or comedian. And he's been that ever since. And this is not some theory or attack. He's all but openly admitted that this is the case for him.
My brain has almost been trained to get used to this. It's like, why would I sit down and I used to do these videos where like I would draw on the videos too. Like everything happens for a reason. I did all these drawings and I did set up all these shots and I was stacking cards, like going around all over New York City. And thinking about doing that now, spending 2 weeks on a video seems terrible. If I can make one reaction video that has double the views, why, like just it really sucks in a sense, because it's like, if you only think about money and views, it's like, why the fuck would I ever go back to that?
Probably the saddest thing about this moment is Sneako's reaction, because it's clear that he's embarrassed with being faced with the consequences of his grift staring him directly in the face. This face that he's making here is him realizing how much of a groomer he's become and that that's how he makes his money. It's a face you make when you're deeply embarrassed and ashamed, but you don't want to let that emotion wash over you. So you're just like, I don't know why they would say such things to me. Because you're a groomer, Sneako. That's why. You behave the way you behave because you know it gets their attention and you want them to think you're cool and interesting and give you money. And you feel kind of bad that this is what you've decided to do with your life, but you realize you're not talented enough to be successful doing anything else. Again, this is not a theory. He's all but openly admitted to this as being the case.
When I noticed how misogynistic a lot of my fans are and how angry they got at just seeing women on a screen, it's almost like I have a responsibility to try to steer them away from that, because I've went down that path and I got out of it, but it can go the wrong way. And the other day I was sitting at the pool and like these 9-year-old kids were jumping in the pool, and then I noticed them start whispering and pointing at me. And I'm like, you were making fun of the fact that 14-year-olds are coming up to me. TikTok, I swear to God, my main channel stuff, it's been people in their 20s, 30s and everything. Yep. This streaming stuff, and especially with the fact that I'm viral on TikTok all the time. 9-year-old kids, I've never seen that in my life. And they come up to me, they take a picture, they're excited. And 9-year-olds, it's almost like you have a responsibility to try to be a role model for these kids. Even though I'm not perfect, even though I'm dumb in a lot of ways, I make a lot of mistakes, but the best role model I can be is showing people that I am human.
And I'm sad because it shows that he's not as soulless as one might think. Like Andrew Tate would have stayed in character the whole time and probably never even have taken pictures with kids in the first place. He'd be too busy beating up women or sword fighting or some shit. But there are better videos about the totality of this specific situation in Sneako. I'm actually a week late on this technically, which is not me being a good commentary guy, but you know, I'm new to this. Of course, Noah Sampson has already looked at the cringe of it all, and Ro Ramden did a really good short video engaging with the heartbreaking nature of this situation. You should check both of those out. But for me, since I'm late and since I'm me, I gotta try to figure out something useful to add to the conversation to legitimize you making a video about this motherfucker. So I want to bring it back to the whole how is the left or we gonna save men conversation, and use it as yet another example of how boys, literal boys in this case, are groomed into this type of behavior even in the absence of a bona fide groomer like Sneako. To make sense of this, let's look at how Sneako and his supporters responded to the backlash of this moment. In a few tweets and Sneako's response comments from other groups talking about this, you see a lot of people saying stuff like boys will be boys, or this is just how normal boys talk and they love edgy jokes and it's no big deal because they don't actually hate gay women and trans people. So first off, the whole boys will be boys stuff is complete bullshit. Most boys are not like this. These boys are like this because these boys are shitty. I know I'm not supposed to say this. You're not supposed to talk bad about kids on the internet. But I have kids, I've worked with kids, and I'm gonna let you know, some kids are shitty. These are those kids. I guarantee you, if you talk to their teachers, babysitters, girls in their class, they'll tell you the truth. And anyone that's worked with kids knows this to be the case. And don't get me wrong, I feel bad for these kids because they're just kids. And for the most part, it's not their fault for being shitty. And it even sucks for the parents because now they have to be deeply embarrassed by this and drugged through the mud. But I guarantee you, they have parents that will say shit like boys will be boys. And I say all of this just to make it clear that these kids were shitty well before they started watching Sneako. Sneako didn't make them shitty, he made them shittier. Their behavior isn't Sneako's fault any more than it's Little Dirk's fault for street crime in Chicago. This is a structural and environmental problem, not the problem of media consumption for children. In fact, I actually agree with Sneako and his supporters when they say that these kids don't hate women or trans people and are just making edgy jokes. I don't think these boys have had enough life experience to effectively develop that type of bigotry or sexism. Those things have to be taught first and then engaged with later in life. Instead, what they're doing is repeating the things they heard Sneako say, which reflects the values that are already being modeled to them in society as a whole. Sneako isn't telling them anything they haven't encountered in their home, school, or church environment. Sneako just happens to be a focal point for this rhetoric to be lionized and celebrated, but it exists outside of Sneako and the red pill and online in general. Like, look at the way that the one kid responds to Sneako as he's trying to clarify who he's supposed to hate.
We love women. We love women.
But not like transgenders.
It's the same type of response you might get if you ask a kid like a quiz question on something they learned at school. He's like, we hate these specific people, right? He doesn't understand why or even the ramifications. He's just aware that if he repeats these things, that makes him good in the eyes of Sneako and society as a whole. Saying we hate gay people, we hate women, we hate transgenders is not an extreme take in our society right now. Going back to the whole thing with Fresh and Fit, understand the fact that Fresh and Fit were able to exist on this platform for years with minimal pushback lets you know how we feel about women in this society. The fact that Matt Walsh, a professed Christian fascist, can make a whole documentary attacking trans people and have it be promoted widely through YouTube with no pushback lets you know how this country feels about trans people. These are not bugs, these are features. So this stuff is all passive and normal for everybody and for these boys until 10 years from now when they join a Tiki Torch March or storm the Capitol, and somebody in the comment section is gonna be talking about what's happening to men? Why isn't the left doing anything for men? My friend suddenly and without warning is becoming a right-wing nut job. FD, why aren't you doing anything about this? These are not my These boys' first groomer wasn't Sneako. It was an older brother or a cousin or uncle or coach or aunt or pastor, someone that they looked up to, male or female, who didn't bother to engage with them on a level that taught them something as simply as misogyny bad. Society basically expects patriarchy to raise boys. We don't raise boys. We don't teach them things. We just tell them what not to do and then shuffle them along. And we wonder why so many boys are dysfunctional by the time they become men. Like I said, I have little boys. I monitor the things they watch. I talk to them all the time about the messages they're encountering in the world and in society. I'm not up late reading bell hooks to them as bedtime stories, but I'm caring enough to have conversations about the fact that they will inevitably face shitty boys. And so when they face those shitty boys, they'll have some defense against this type of behavior. And if I were to ever see them behaving in this way, I would do some very intense, gentle parenting. And don't get me wrong, this is not to say that those of us with better ideas about how to raise boys and how to engage boys in the world should just throw our hands up and never say anything. But it's to respond to this criticism that people aren't doing enough. People refuse to admit that the bulk of red pill consumers are literal children. Red pill ideology is a natural extension to how so many boys are already being raised and taught in this world. It's boys who have been groomed in a patriarchal society to see the type of goofy antics of a Sneako as amusing and harmless. If you've ever watched Sneako's content, it's pretty clear you're not getting highbrow, mind-expanding content. You're getting low-effort toilet humor half the time. That will be most appealing to boys between 11 and 15. The worst of those boys might get sucked in deep and stay there for longer, but most will phase out and graduate to Joe Rogan, which is still bad, but at least not as embarrassing. What makes someone a groomer is that they identify vulnerable and impressionable young people, and they take advantage of that vulnerability to extract some type of benefit. For typical groomers, we're usually talking about sex and control over their bodies, but for guys like Sneako, it's money and attention. But the system makes that possible. I used to work in anti-sex trafficking, and the modern discourse on sex trafficking will have you thinking that it's just slick talking pimps in bright fancy suits or evil sex traffickers from Europe snatching children off the streets in white vans. Both of those things are relatively rare for the real problem of the types of girls that become victims to sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is a problem of economics. When young girls and some boys are in dire situations because of a lack of care or stability or resources, they end up in the streets. In fact, one of the biggest predictors of whether or not a girl will end up a victim of sex trafficking is whether or not she runs away from home. Like, I guarantee if you go and you look through Andrew Tate's sex trafficking case, you'll find that probably many of his victims are girls from meager economic background who the police or the system care little about. The best way to address sex trafficking is to address the economic and social needs of young girls and boys so that they don't fall prey to the groomers and predators who come sniffing around. And the same goes for little boys and red pill nonsense. It's not just the red pill content they consume, it's the social environment that makes red pill content viable in the first place. I've heard people critique the idea that the way we talk about identity politics just make people feel bad, and it sounds like original sin, that you're just automatically a bad person if you're a straight white man. And well, I really empathize with the idea of being judged based on your appearance. I know that must feel horrible. That argument is mostly cope. It's the fact that people don't want to believe that a system is fixed to produce a specific outcome, even as they see that outcome continue to be reproduced over and over and over again. No matter what shallow down the line interventions people put out there, the same problems have been occurring in our society for literal generations. And some people would rather just say that's naturally how society is supposed to happen than look at themselves and their behavior and how they contribute to those problems happening in the first place. But this isn't a full FD signifier video, so we'll leave that alone. But the lesson I give to you here is don't just mean tweet at Sneako for being a groomer and call yourself counteracting the red pill. Push to work and connect with boys in your community. Talk to them about this stuff. Ask them and monitor who they're watching online. Have some talks with them on the nature of the content that they're consuming, and try to do so in a way that pulls them in as opposed to pushes them out. If they are shitty, support them on their way out of being shitty. If their parents are shitty, do what you can. Also remember, don't start with my videos or highly academic concepts or texts or work. It's going to be too much too soon, and you can probably get much further just by talking about some of their favorite positively masculine characters in media. Like, both Spider-Man are amazing. Deku from My Hero Academia. Pretty much every iteration of the Ninja Turtles. The idea that we don't have positive boy or male role models in the media is bullshit. There's plenty, and you could really start there and get a lot more done. Show them that guys like Sneako and Andrew Tate would be the villains to guys like Spider-Man. All that said, I will leave some academic readings and videos and description. And if you have any other books or pieces of content that are easy to digest as a starting point for counteracting the types of messages that these boys are getting in society, please leave that in the comment section. Probably try to make like at least a watch list or a reading list for this type of stuff. And we're gonna make the world a little less shitty, one boy at a time. That's all I got for today, y'all. I'm FD Signifier, and this has been Light Work.